Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDPs, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. Happy Friday. It is Friday, November 22nd, 7 a.m. Eastern. I'm your host, Jon Jeune. Happy to be with you guys here today. And it is week 12. It's crazy. Season's flying by already. We're trying to make that push into the fantasy playoffs. And, hopefully you guys are either at the top of that seed, the top of your leagues, fighting for the 1 or 2 seed, fighting for that bye, or maybe you are in the middle of the pack trying to hold your position, maybe trying to work your way to the top to earn that bye week, or and maybe you're not in, hopefully you're not in this position, but it's still a good position to be in. You are in maybe 7th, 8th, 9th place. Your league is packed and you are fighting to get into playoff position. And guys, it is possible. You just got to keep on fighting. Sometimes we, early in the season, maybe start out 0-3 or, 1-4. And we're like, how am I ever supposed to overcome this? And, some people, they really just give up, and I definitely hope you are not one of those people. I know in one of my very important home leagues with all my college buddies, I started out 2-4. I am now 7-4. So all it takes is make some moves off the waiver wire. Trying to figure out who on your team is, maybe we're playing guys because they have some draft capital that, we feel like we need to stay locked into. But at this point, I will play whoever is going to help me get a win. So, guys, let's get into it. It is Friday. As I mentioned, you know what that means. It is the matchup show. And if you have not been with us all season, what does that mean? That means that essentially we are looking at the expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros, and we're looking specifically at those running backs, those wide receivers that are outside the top 20, those quarterbacks, those tight ends that are outside the top 10, and we're trying to figure out which of those guys deserve a longer look at possibly getting into our lineup this week and looking at their matchups and how that plays a role in whether they should get into our lineups. And then on the other side of that, we're looking at those guys that are inside those same thresholds that maybe deserve a seat this week, or maybe we need to supplement our lineup in a way that makes up for the quote unquote down performance that they may have based on a particular matchup. So let's jump into that. But before I do that, just need to call you all to action. Make sure you are commenting, liking, and subscribing, whether you are watching on Apple or whether you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, or maybe you're watching on X or Instagram. Either way, no matter how you are consuming this content, first and foremost, definitely appreciate you. Second most, please make sure you are commenting, liking, and subscribing, or following for that matter as well. So let's jump into the Week 12 matchup show. And first, we've got to recap the Week 11 results, right? Because, we like to take accountability here. So I'm going to go through what it was last week. And last week we had, I think we gave out 17 recommendations. Let me just pull that up. 17 recommendations, I believe it was. And is that correct? Yes, 17 picks. We had 6 guys beat their ECR by 10 or more spots. We had another one of the 17 guys beat their ECR outright, and we had 8 guys on the flip side of that were big misses. So they missed they actually underperformed their ECR by 10 spots, or maybe we recommended them as guys that you may want to have a little bit trepidation about. They actually ended up beating their spot, uh, by 10 or more spots. So, and we also had 2 ties in this one. So, guys that did not beat their ECR at all, they actually just performed right to expectation there. So, it was not the best week, but let's have an even better week in week 12. But let's walk through some of the misses from last week, just or the misses, the ties, the hits from last week, just to give you guys an idea. In terms of the big hits, we had Marquez Valdez Scantling uh, came in as the ECR wide receiver 48 in week 11, finished as the wide receiver 22. We had Cam Akers came in as the ECR running back 40, finished as the running back 20. Uh, we had Anthony Richardson, who came in as the ECR quarterback 22, came in as the uh, finished as the quarterback 4. And sorry, there's 2 more, but they're not on this list for whatever reason here. So bear with me. Um, and we had Will Disley, who came in as the tight end 16 on the ECR rankings, finished as the tight end 6. Jonnu Smith, who finished as the tight end 2 after being ranked the tight end 15. And then we gave out a warning on Jaden Reed, who was ranked as the wide receiver 20 and finished as the wide receiver 43 there. So those were the big hits. In terms of the hits, Dawson Knox was only 2 spots. Don't even know if we should really claim this one, but came in as a tight end 20, finished as the tight end 18. So not much of a difference there from the ECR. And then the 2 guys that just finished as expected, Drake May came in as the quarterback 15, finished as the quarterback 15, and then Keyshawn Butte came in as the wide receiver 53, finished as the wide receiver 53. So in terms of the misses there, and all the misses were big misses. So I don't know how I feel about that. CJ Stroud, quarterback 13, finished as the quarterback 25. Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 28, finishes the wide receiver 68. Mike Williams, the wide receiver 53, finished tied with a bunch of other players for the wide receiver 104, scoring 0 points. Pat Fryermuth, the tight end 18, finishes the tight end 32. Ricky Pearsall tied with Mike Williams for 0 fantasy points, finishing as the wide receiver 104 after coming in as the wide receiver 40. Cedric Tillman finishes the wide receiver 50 after coming in as the wide receiver 21. And then the 2 that the Joe Burrow, I'm not overly upset about. He came in ranked as the quarterback 6, finishes the quarterback 2. That game went absolutely bananas near the end. And for a while, it looked like, that recommendation was holding true. And then, Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals just went nuts in that second half, specifically in that fourth quarter there, to, end up with a QB2 finish here for Joe Burrow. I know he was hot. I get it. He was in the flames. Maybe I should have stayed in the flames. But you looked at the Chargers pass defense, how they've been playing. I felt like it made sense from a process perspective. I also did say I would play Justin Herbert over him, which Justin Herbert was very good, had a fine performance, just was not the quarterback 2 on the week. And quarterback 2s, depending on how you look at Taysom Hill, because I didn't count Taysom Hill as a quarterback this week. I know you can play him in quarterback, but nobody's actually starting Taysom Hill as a quarterback. I'm not going to count him as a quarterback. So to me, Joe Burrow is a quarterback too. And then the one I'm like the least proud of, that's the Amon-Ra St. Brown one. Came in as the wide receiver 2, finished as the wide receiver 1. And I felt good about that one in terms of, again, I said, there's no need to sit him. I said I was considering sitting him just because I was looking for some upside. I ended up not sitting him for Cedric Tillman, so I'm actually happy about that. But it was just the fact that, again, if you looked at the Lions and how they've done in double-digit wins, Amon-Ra St. Brown's production was not there. There was not. It was all floor. It was, not a ton of targets, dependent on touchdowns. This was, the first real game in any of those instances where we see him see, a, an allotment of targets, big yardage. Actually scored twice in this game. So, I definitely don't feel the best about that one, especially if there's any guys out there that did sit Amon-Ra St. Brown. I hope you didn't. But yeah, that's one that I will learn from for sure going forward. So with that being said, let's jump into the matchup show for week 12. And the first guy we're going to talk about is a repeat Minnesota running back, Cam Akers, coming in as the ECR running back 35 in a game against the Minnesota Vikings face off against the Chicago Bears. And it's another week of bye weeks, and this week is a heavy one with 6 teams on bye. Akers came through for us last week, top 20 finish. He's been more involved in the offense, especially with Aaron Jones a little banged up the last couple weeks. Chicago allows the second most PPR points to opposing running backs over their last 3 games. So it's definitely a nice spot for Akers to bring back some potential RB2 value. Last night I was on SiriusXM fantasy radio with the football diehards, Mike Dempsey, Bob Harris, and those guys were asking me about Cam Akers, and I definitely think he's going to have a role, right? I think that as we move forward in this fantasy season, especially these next few weeks, with the bye weeks and everything, Cam Akers is going to be somebody that we can look to for some cheap running back production. And especially he's got that built-in upside again, where if something happens to Aaron Jones, Cam Akers ends up in a role, a productive role there. Fantasy football girl advice. Good morning. Will Aaron Jones play? Well, good morning. I think Aaron Jones is going to play. The question is how productive, how effective will he be? I think, with the rib injury, it's more of a pain tolerance thing. The fact that he's even out there. I mean, it's not like he's unable to move or anything like that. So it's just more of pain tolerance. How many, will he be able to get through contact and things? But last I checked, he practiced in full. You picked up Cam Akers. That's a good thing to do. I would still be willing to play Cam Akers just because the matchup is actually in his favor, right? So, I don't know if he scores a touchdown like he did last week, but if he picks up the efficiency from last week to how it's been in previous weeks, then I think there's, definitely some meat on the bone there for Cam Akers. Moving on to this next matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New York Giants. Let's look at, maybe you want to hold your nose for this one. Let's look at New York Giants quarterback Tommy DeVito, and let me put quarterback in there because that's what he is. New York Giants quarterback Tommy DeVito, and so this one requires, again, some major guts here. Tommy DeVito, he's been promoted to the starting quarterback for a struggling Daniel Jones after filling in for an injured Daniel Jones last year. DeVito definitely had his moments last year, and most of those came in good matchups. And this matchup against Tampa Bay would qualify as a good matchup, as Tampa Bay has allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. And to those sitting on the fence, let me just sell you this point. DeVito's capable of using his legs as well. He's averaged almost 28 rushing yards per game in his 6 starts last year. So again, this is more of like a, if you're absolutely desperate, you know, there's nobody on waivers. Maybe you're in a 2 quarterback league and you are looking for somebody to fill a spot. Tommy DeVito, I think, definitely could help you out given the matchup this week. Let's move on to this next matchup, the New England Patriots against the Miami Dolphins. And let's look at New England wide receiver Kendrick Bourne. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 63. Talked about Bourne in the waiver show on Tuesday. He's the Patriots' best wide receiver, in my opinion. It's not even close. He had 5 targets, 5 catches, 70 receiving yards, and a touchdown in week 11. And he should be given more opportunities to be a top option for Drake May. Again, bye weeks. There's 6 teams on bye. We've got to look all over for some of this fantasy production. And again, Kendrick Bourne, very talented player, very good player, even from his time with the 49ers. So I just find it hard to, as this Patriots offense cons to come into form with Drake May under center, who are those guys that, they're going to consistently rely on? And I think Kendrick Bourne can be that guy. Moving on to the next game here, we've got the Tennessee Titans against the Houston Texans. And let's talk about Tennessee wide receiver Calvin Ridley. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 24. Ridley has finished as a top 5 wide receiver in PPR scoring in 2 of the last 4 weeks. He's seeing a 30% target share in the last 3 weeks, which leads the Titans by a pretty wide margin. And with Will Levis playing better these last couple of weeks, it should bring a bit of stability and a solid floor to Calvin Ridley's game from a fantasy perspective. And the matchup with Houston is a +1, as the Texans have allowed the 6th most PPR points to the wide receiver position over their last 3 games here. So I know it was a tough one for fantasy managers with Ridley to start the year, but since DeAndre Hopkins got traded to the Chiefs, it's really been wheels up for Calvin Ridley. Let's move on to the next matchup here. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs against the Carolina Panthers. And for the first time, I think I got three recommendations here, but let's just get it going from the top. First guy we'll talk about is Kansas City running back Isaiah Pacheco, the ECR PPR running back 34. Welcome back, buddy. I get that he's coming back from an injury, but by all accounts, he seems good to go, with the biggest concern probably being his conditioning. So I think he gets enough opportunities to help us out with the bye weeks here against the Carolina defense, allowing the 5th most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games here. So I get it. Do you want to play the guy coming back from the injury? You don't know what the role is going to be like. But I think Pacheco gets involved a decent amount to be able to help us out this week and, really be a productive fantasy asset for us, especially with 6 teams on bye. Next guy in this game we're going to talk about is Carolina tight end Jatavian Sanders, ECR PPR tight end 18. Look, I understand that Thielen is coming back from the injury here and probably going to siphon some targets here and limit the opportunities that Sanders is going to see. But I don't think there's 18 tight ends in fantasy football worth starting over Sanders this week. I mean, by 18, I mean 17, because he is the tight end 18. But he scored at least 9.9 PPR points in 4 of his last 5 games, with at least 49 receiving yards and a touchdown in 4 of those 5 games. And he's set to face off against a Kansas City defense that has allowed the 14th most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games. So Carolina will be trailing. They're double-digit underdogs in this game. There's going to be plenty of opportunities to go around for their pass game options. Jatavian Sanders will be a part of that as well. So moving on to the next guy, the last guy we'll talk about in this game. And speaking of the devil, Carolina wide receiver Adam Thielen. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 59 this week. his first game back since week 3, was a reliable target for Bryce Young last year. And with Deontay Johnson gone, he should assume his role as a top target in the passing offense starting this week against the Kansas City defense, allowing the 12th most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games. Moving on to the next game, we've got the Dallas Cowboys facing off against the Washington Commanders. Now, there's 2 guys in this game I want to touch on. The first guy being Washington running back Austin Eckler. He is the ECR PPR running back 25. And look, I understand Brian Robinson is back from the injury and that they're 10.5-point favorites here, which probably plays a role in Austin Eckler being ranked here as he does a lot of his work in the receiving game. But Eckler's hot right now. Back-to-back finishes as an RB1, three straight finishes inside the top 13. I'd find it hard to find 24 running backs that I would want to play ahead of Austin Eckler right now, especially given the matchup against Dallas. Staying in this game, let's talk about Dallas tight end Luke Schoonmaker, ECR PPR tight end 26. Jake Ferguson most likely out with a concussion in week 12, leaving a wide open opportunity here for the second-year tight end who recorded 10 targets on Monday night after Ferguson left the game. And coming up this week is a Washington defense that has allowed the 7th most PPR points to the tight end position over their last 3 games. So CeeDee Lamb also banged up. Dallas expected to trail big in this game. Luke Schoonmaker is going to have a ton of opportunities on Sunday. Moving on to the next game, we've got the Detroit Lions against the Indianapolis Colts. Detroit tight end Sam Laporta, ECR PPR tight end 12. Look, it's been a disappointing season for the second-year tight end, but it's not because he's suddenly can't play, right? It's because the targets haven't really been there. He's had at least 6 targets in 2 of his last 3 games, and I'm going to be willing to bet on the talent here, winning out eventually for Laporta, especially this week against an Indianapolis defense that is allowing the 8th most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games. Look, I love Laporta just as much as the next person. He was my breakout tight end last year going into his rookie season, and he had a fantastic season there in his first year in Detroit. But one of the things that gave me trepidation about Laporta this year and why I couldn't have him inside the top 2 of tight ends was just the fact that there were more mouths to feed in this offense with a healthy Jameson Williams, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs both being healthy to come in, to start the year and both expected to play a major role. Laporta was just going to, naturally see less targets. And I didn't think it would go this far in that direction, but eventually the pendulum has to swing back in the other direction. And I would, feel I would think that starts pretty soon, especially as the Detroit Lions start gearing up for a playoff run of their own here. So have faith in Laporta. I get it. I know that I was on here a few weeks ago, talking about Zach Ertz over Laporta, but that was mainly based on the targets, and it seems like he's 2 of those last 3 games seeing 6 targets. You've got to feel definitely confident about that. Moving on to the next matchup here, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders at home hosting the red hot Denver Broncos. And I can tell you what, it won't be Bo Nix because the fantasy community is finally putting some respect on Bo Nix. I feel like I haven't even spoken about Bo Nix in a couple weeks now. And I don't know if that feels like a good thing or it's a bad thing. I mean, it's definitely a good thing, right? Because now everybody sees what we've been seeing here on this show since the start of the year here with Bo Nix. So, glad to see him graduate, being off of the matchup show weekly. So let's talk about somebody else in this game, and let's talk about Las Vegas Raiders running back Amir Abdullah, ECR PPR running back 40. And look, sometimes we have to get a little down and dirty, and this definitely qualifies as down and dirty. There's potentially no Alexander Madison this week, potentially no Zamir White this week, and with uh, the primary healthy backs going into this game are Amir Abdullah and sixth round rookie Dylan Laub. So yes, hold your nose here, but I don't think it'll be entirely bad, especially considering that Denver gives up receiving production to opposing running backs, which is where Abdullah specializes. So again, if you're looking for some cheap PPR points, a guy to come in, catch 4 or 5 passes, maybe get you 100 scrimmage yards between the rush and the receiving, maybe fall in the end zone. I think Abdullah can bring that to you, especially this week. 6 running backs on bye, and there's almost no running back that you'll find that is going to be this free, right? I'm talking about like free. When I did the waiver show on Tuesday, he was 100% available in Yahoo leagues. So free, cheap production, and he might even still be there Sunday morning when you're waking up trying to figure out who do I want to put in my lineup this week. So I know it's dirty, it's nasty, but sometimes we got to do what we got to do to get a win. Moving on to the next matchup, let's talk about San Francisco against Green Bay, and let's talk about Green Bay wide receiver Christian Watson. He's the PPR wide receiver 37 in terms of expert consensus rankings. Watson showed off his big playability that captivated fantasy managers 2 years ago. He amassed 150 receiving yards on 4 receptions in Week 11, while Jaden Reed is probably the better overall player in real life and the one that the Packers try to get the football to in terms of their in terms of their wide receivers. I think that Watson has today the most upside as a traditional true wide receiver, as evidenced by his team leading 22% target share over the last 3 games, seeing a combined 17 targets during that span. And in a middle of the road matchup against the San Francisco defense, I think Watson deserves a spot in lineups this week for folks that are looking for a solid flex play during the apocalypse. Let's move on to the next game here. We got the Arizona Cardinals against the Seattle Seahawks, and a guy that I'm becoming a huge fan of and enjoying talking about on these shows. Between him and Cam Akers, it seems like Arizona running back Trey Benson. He's the ECR PPR running back 37. Again, 6 teams on bye. We have to look everywhere for help, especially at the running back position. And I don't know what your leagues look like, but the running backs on waivers are looking real slim. So a guy like Benson provides significant value, in my opinion. He helped us out 2 weeks ago before a bye week of his own. And the last time we saw him, he looked really good. Just eye test, looked awesome. And maybe not good enough to take the backfield from James Conner, but I think he definitely looked good enough to deserve some more consistent touches. And like I said before, I have a thing for rookies out of the bye week, and Trey Benson fits that criteria this week. So Trey Benson definitely deserves a look in your starting lineup if you are looking for some, RB2, RB3, a flex play this week. Moving on to the next matchup, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the LA Rams on Sunday Night Football. And I literally didn't know who to choose in this game here. It's an ugly one for sure. And yeah, I could have looked to Eagles pass catchers here with Devontae Smith, questionable with a hamstring injury, but I would honestly have very little faith in any of those guys. So let's talk about LA Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 6. facing off against a Philadelphia defense that allows the least amount of PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games. Now, the Rams are creative in how they deploy their wide receivers and how they get them open, but this is a tough matchup for sure. And I'm not saying we bench Cooper Kupp. That's not what I'm saying at all. But let's chase a little upside in our lineups this week to account for a potential down game here. I mean, this Eagles pass defense is legit. They are on the road. I don't know if that really matters as much, but their pass defense is so legit. And Puka Nacua seems to be, their big play threat. I know Cooper Kupp had, the big play last week, the 69-yard touchdown on, what seemed like a broken play. The defender just, let Cooper Kupp get over the top, and there was no safety there. It just did not seem like it was, by especially, specifically did not seem like design, but I think that's obvious for sure. But seemed more like a broken play than anything. But not to take anything away from Cooper Kupp, obviously. I think he's a great player. But I think Puka Nacua is the guy that they will try to get the ball to, down the field consistently. And I think Kupp, will obviously get his opportunities, but it's just a tough matchup here. So that's where I'm leaning Cooper Kupp. But that's the only potential sit that I have this week, or guy that I have trepidation about this week. I don't want to say sit because we're not sitting him. But the next game we're going to talk about is the Baltimore Ravens against the LA Chargers. And let's talk about Baltimore Ravens running back J.K. Dobbins. He's the ECR PPR running back 22. Screw it. Let's go with the revenge game narrative. I mean, the former Baltimore Raven, yeah, I know it's a revenge game for Gus Edwards too, but let's go with the guy who's already been productive in Dobbins. Matchup against Baltimore, middle of the road, not concerned there. I think this game actually plays out to be a close one that the Chargers probably win at home here. So this should play well into a good game for Dobbins here. So it's actually interesting that the Chargers and Rams are playing home games on Sunday and Monday night, back-to-back nights in the same stadium. Anyway, that doesn't matter for this game, but Dobbins probably was going to be in your lineup anyway, but let's just anticipate a bigger week from Dobbins, bigger than running back 22, probably closer to a top 15, top 12 finish this week against his former team in the Baltimore Ravens. Now, let's get on to the starts of the week for week 12. And before that, we've got to recap week 11. And week 11 was not good, guys. It's just gross looking at it. Guys that I definitely thought were going to have big weeks. I mean, but even when you look at when I was on Twitter, like haven't really been listening to a ton of other fantasy podcasts this week, but or this year. But when I did, I heard, a lot of these guys come up. So I was like, oh, I'm not, I'm not alone here in my thinking with some of these guys. But yeah, Russell Wilson finished as a quarterback 27, not great. Jonathan Taylor, the running back 30, that's not great. I mean, Anthony Richardson did score 2 touchdowns, which I was happy about because we talked about Anthony Richardson, but that took away from some start of the week value there for Jonathan Taylor. George Pickens had a solid day, but finished as a wide receiver 19, so not solid enough for a start of the week. And then Tucker Kraft gave us a 0, absolutely just dudded on us for a tying for the tight end 57. So definitely not great, but let's bounce back this week and let's look at our quarterback start of the week this week. And first off, that's going to be Houston Texans quarterback CJ Stroud going up against the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans allow the 12th most PPR or fantasy points, I should say, to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. Houston is at home in this game. This game's going to be played in a dome. I think there's going to be some high scoring in this one as well. Will Levis and Calvin Ridley probably going to keep a little bit more pace than people think on the other side. And Stroud's going to have to go, and he's got his big boy toy in Nico Collins back. So I think that's going to only take Stroud's game up to, you know, that level that we saw last year, and the level that makes him such a high draft pick coming into the season. So I'm anticipating a top 5 finish here for CJ Stroud. Moving on to the running back, let's look at New York Giants running back Tyrone Tracy going up against Tampa Bay. Tracy is the workhorse here for this New York Giants offense. You know, the last time we saw him, he did have a fumble, but he's coming off 3 straight games with at least 17 opportunities. And again, matchup here is solid. Tampa Bay allows the 9th most PPR points to opposing running backs. I think Tracy, should be leaned on a little bit more, especially with Daniel Jones not here to take some of those opportunities around the goal line. I know I said that Tommy DeVito is capable of using his legs, but not to the level that Daniel Jones was, where you have to design it as a part of your offense. So I think Tyrone Tracy definitely going to come through in a big way. Definitely seeing a top 10 finish here for the rookie running back. Let's move on to the wide receiver start of the week, and that's going to be Tennessee Titans wide receiver Calvin Ridley going up against the Houston Texans. So staying in the same game as CJ Stroud. I mean, we talked about Ridley not too long ago as part of the matchup show, but seeing a 30% target share over his last 3 games, he's been the most consistent targeted option in this Tennessee Titans passing attack. And in a matchup here against Houston that allows the 6th most PPR points to the wide receiver position, I see Calvin Ridley having another big day as he's finished as a top 5 wide receiver in 2 of his last 4 games. And if he keeps this trend going, he's doing it. He did it every other game. So this is probably the on game. So let's put some trust in Calvin Ridley for a big week this week. And moving on to the tight end start of the week, let's look at New England tight end Hunter Henry going up against the Miami Dolphins, who the Dolphins have allowed the 3rd most PPR points to opposing tight ends over their last 3 games. Obviously, they just gave up a big week to Brock Bowers. Hunter Henry, not Brock Bowers, but Austin Hooper, limited, probably going to miss this week, which Austin Hooper has been vulturing some tight end targets here from Hunter Henry. So I think Hunter Henry is going to take some of those targets back. He's been the most consistent option here for Drake May since he entered in as the starting quarterback for the Patriots. And so expecting a big week from Hunter Henry this week. And that's all I got for starts of the week. Do have some questions. And Alex Smith, former quarterback Alex Smith? Probably not, but we'll just say it is for the sake of the show. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, Alex, for the question. Kyler Murray or Bo Nix? That is a good one. And I know I started the show saying, hey, let's not get caught up in the draft capital. Let's not get caught up in, the name value of somebody. And I have to lean Bo Nix. I mean, stay in the flames with Bo Nix. The matchup here is a very good one. The Raiders allow the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over the last 3 games. Kyler Murray facing off against Seattle, who allowed the 15th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. It's definitely a close one, right? I think expert consensus rankings, Kyler Murray is the quarterback 5, Bo Nix is the quarterback 6, so they're literally back to back. I have Bo Nix slightly higher though, but that's mainly because I think Bo Nix has a bigger ceiling in his matchup, due to his matchup, than Kyler Murray does. The range of outcomes much smaller for Kyler Murray. the thing about Kyler Murray is he's been, he had 2 rushing touchdowns last week against, or not last week, but the last time he played against the Jets. But he hasn't been running all that much, right? I mean, 3 carries for 29 yards, 2 carries for 6 yards, 5 carries for 19 yards. Did have a 6 for 64 and a touchdown, but 7 for 14. So it's like he's not getting those consistent um rushing attempts and rushing yards that we've known from Kyler Murray, which is kind of capping, stealing away some of his floor, but also capping a little bit of his upside as well. He's it's good for him. It's good for the Cardinals, but he's kind of playing boring football right now, which um, from that perspective, from a fantasy perspective, not getting a ton of upside there with Kyler Murray. So I'm going to lean Bo Nix again. He's playing really, really well right now, and so I'm probably going to stay in the Flames with Bo Nix, but definitely a tough decision to make there. Alex Smith also says Houston defense is fired up, getting players back. Yeah, no, I agree. Houston defense is definitely fired up. Um, However, Calvin Ridley seeing 30% of the team targets. Yeah, I'm probably gonna stay in the Flames there with that, but we'll obviously see what happens. And Fantasy Football Girl Advice says Bo Nix and head coach Sean Payton have been doing good, but Murray has more weapons, don't you think? I mean, Murray has weapons, right? I mean, he's got Marvin Harrison, he's got a Trey McBride, but I mean, they're underdogs in this game, which I don't really get per se. I feel like Arizona should win this game as 1.5 point dogs on the road, or maybe it's up to 2.5 now. But um, yeah, again, it really comes down to the upside here for me, and maybe it depends on what you need, right? But Bo Nix has had a safe floor as well too, so I don't want to take that away from him. He's got the floor and the ceiling. Um, Alex Smith saying playing Bo Nix has running upside as well, but I think he throws the ball better and doesn't have better weapons, but he has more weapons to spread the ball out to than Kyler does. Yeah, no, you're right, right? He doesn't have maybe the big names that Kyler has in a Trey McBride and a Marvin Harrison Jr., but outside of those guys, right? Like what does Kyler really have, right? I mean, yeah, Trey McBride's probably a top 3 tight end in football today, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is he's a prospect. He's a top prospect, but he's not a top receiver, I wouldn't think, in football. So Bo Nix has his legs as well. He's got Cortland Sutton, who's a legitimate NFL wide receiver. And Cortland Sutton's been seeing 30% of the team targets over the last 3 weeks. Outside of that, yeah, there's no names to throw to, but he's playing in an offense where he's going to spread the ball around. At least 5, 6 guys will catch a pass on Sunday. And I think, Bo Nix he's comfortable right now. He's playing hot. To your point, Alex, he's throwing the ball better. Kyler Murray is throwing the ball pretty well right now. I don't want to take that away from him either. But again, like I said, it's not the Kyler Murray that we're used to, where it's run all over the place, throw the ball down the field, making these big plays, going on these, ridiculous, trying to extend plays, going and running the football for, 40, 50, 60 yards a game. Yeah, we're not getting that from Kyler Murray right now. So, but yeah, look, you could have worse problems than trying to decide between Bo Nix and Kyler Murray, right? So, but yeah, I'm staying in the Flames with Bo Nix. All right, y'all. That is all I got. Really do appreciate the questions there. Again, as always, guys, if you guys have questions, always feel free to, write them in the chat, or if you want to DM me on social media at the real Jon J _FF on X as well as Instagram. Make sure you are catching, the social media content as well. Post my Thursday night football picks, where we've gone 4 of 5, 4-1 each of the last 3 weeks. Last night being George Pickens reception prop being the only thing we missed last night, but we still got the over on the total, the Browns to cover, the Browns to win. Russell Wilson's over on his passing prop. So it was a solid night for us in that regards. And then starts of the week, you guys obviously heard it here, but an even more in-depth video with some a little bit more analysis will go out on social media on Saturday. So very much appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we will catch y'all on Tuesday for the waiver show. Good luck this weekend, guys. Peace.